Welcome to the Hunter Report. Most of you know me as a photographer, and today we're going to talk about what happens when a client of yours invites other professionals to a gig and it seems like those professionals are there to do the exact same job as you, possibly replace you in the future. What do you do in this situation? This doesn't just apply to photography. This applies to all areas of work. This is just a general talk on professionalism, how to keep your cool, things like that. My name is Hunter. This is the Hunter Report. I've been doing this show for a long time. I like to be informative. I like to be insightful and helpful. I also get sort of goofy sometimes. I don't think I'm going to get all that goofy today, but let's go ahead and dive right into it. Please subscribe. Please give me thumbs up, and let's talk about this situation. Quick rundown of the top 5, then we're going to go real deep for those of you who are actually interested in what I have to say instead of tuning off to somewhere else in YouTube land. So let's go quick summary 1 to 5. Number 1, keep your cool. Number 2, always be prepared and work on planning. Number 3, treat it as if the universe is testing you. Treat this situation, this adversity, where there's another professional in the same room who's sort of competing with you, maybe stepping on your toes. Treat it as a competition. It's not about playing the other player, it's about playing the game. More on that later. Number 4, try to understand why that other person is there. Maybe in your mind, you see them as stepping on your toes or as competitive to you or as out to get you, but really try and remove yourself outside of your own self and understand why the client, okay, who's the person who brought them there in the first place, has them there. Maybe it's their sister-in-law's, child. Maybe there's some kind of unknown reason, and until you know that reason, you're not going to be satisfied. So more on that later. Number 5, attempt to break the ice with this other professional who's there competing with you or who's there in a capacity that feels like it's duplicating your effort. Attempt to befriend them. Reach out to them. Send out a white flag. Try to strike up a conversation, break the ice. All right, that's a quick summary. If you're still with me, if you haven't tuned out, let's go really deep into some of these topics with some stories that I've gathered over the years and just some of the experiences that I want to share with you. So, I'm a photographer and my client goes ahead and invites another videographer to the gig. Now, first of all, the client has no idea that I also provide video services, and the client has no idea that they're cutting me out of what I see as at least 100% extra money that I could have been making at that gig. If they had simply given me the courtesy of saying, do you do video? Then I would have said, yes, it's going to charge you a little bit extra, but I'm going to bring 2 extra cameras. I am going to do the best job I can possibly can with honors, sir or ma'am. And but that conversation never happened. So we see ourselves in a situation. There's an unknown person at the gig. They have a camera in their hands. I know nothing about this person, but I'm immediately gathering information. So number 1 is keep your cool. Now, I have a certain personality type. That personality type happens to be very excited, very gung-ho. You could even call me sort of like alpha or controlling. Definitely extroverted, and I like to be in leadership roles. That's why I run my own company. I have learned after 15 years I cannot tolerate working for anybody else, in a boss to employee relationship. That's why I work for my clients, and it makes me so happy. But there's a whole other set of rules involved when there's clients. So number 1 is to keep your cool, and I take my own advice so much. You can already see I'm getting a little worked up, but this is just my passion that's trying to come through, and I think I'm being very constructive and positive about it. You can just see how passionate I am. So keep your cool. Under all circumstances, be respectful to the other professional. Under all circumstances, assume that they are just like you, a professional they are respectful, that they are mature, okay? And age has a lot to do with it, okay? The older you get, the less phased, or even experience. You could be young and experienced as well. You could be 12 years old, have grown up in a war-torn country like Afghanistan or something, have had to grow up real quick. So age has not so much to do with it, it's experience that has a lot to do with it. So be respectful to the other person, assume nothing. Okay, the word assume has the word ass in it, and it makes an ass out of me and an ass out of you when you go ahead and make assumptions about any situation. Always approach a situation with an open mind. The world is a really small place. I live in New York City, and a lot of people tend to think, oh, I'm never going to see this other professional, this other person again, so why don't I just go ahead and be a huge asshole to them? Okay, the problem is, I said that the world is a very small place, and it is. Yes, there's 7 billion people, and yes, you can get lost in the crowd. But here's what I mean. There are social circles. You ever see that movie, 6 Degrees of Separation? Social circles exist because not every human being is going to have a high probability of being in the same room as you, but other human beings are. And what I mean by this is, sure, a homeless person on the street, you're probably never gonna see them again, okay? Especially if you're a well-to-do, perfectly or well enough adjusted individual trying to go and make your life. But other people who are ambitious and young and living in the same geographic environment, there is a very high probability that sometime between now and the next 720 days, in other words, 2 years, you are going to see them. In fact, I'd almost put money on it. It goes back to something called the birthday paradox. But it really boils down to, don't shit on people. You probably will see them again. And part of being a professional is acting as a professional all the time. Now, it's a balancing act. I used to be a desk employee. I made a lot of money, but I was extremely unhappy. But the one thing that kept me from getting fired in those desk jobs is that I held my tongue. Now, maybe I lost all of this hair on my head because I held my tongue too much. I was stressing myself out. But that's getting off topic. The point is, when your passions bubble up, when your humors and your emotions bubble up, it generally is going to get you in trouble if you act on them immediately. So it's always good to take a step back, to take a deep breath, and to assess the situation. So that gets us on. That was all a giant long-winded point number 1. So number 2. Planning. So we already covered number 1, which is keep your cool, okay? If you lose your cool, you're probably gonna get either asked to leave, okay? You're definitely never gonna get invited back by the client. But planning is actually something you can do to take control over the situation before you ever step into the room. Let me tell you, the client calls you, says, hey, I need a photographer, or I need an XYZ, an actor, a business person, a programmer, whatever. The first thing you say to the client is, now I'm going to role play as myself. The first thing I'm going to say to the client is, well, did you happen to know that on top of photography, I also do video? Now, were you in need of video? And this, for me as a photographer, prevents these awkward situations from arising where I show up at a gig, there's another videographer there, and I don't want them to be there. The way you take control over that situation is say to the client, did you know I also provide video services for a small additional extra cost? Instantly, you have created a situation where if the client says yes, it's your ideal situation. I don't even have to make this video anymore, but every once in a while, there's other forces at play. Even if you play it perfectly, if you plan it perfectly, if you control the situation perfectly, other forces are at play. And that other photo person, video person, or just whatever line of work you're in, that other person's gonna be there. So no matter what you do, what kind of planning you do, sometimes it won't work, but most of the time, 75%, maybe even 80 to 90% of the time, simply asking the right questions to take control over the situation with the client will make sure that the expectations are set. Point number 3, treat it as if the universe is testing you, okay? This is the most productive way that you can go about this situation. So, step 1, you've kept your cool, you are keeping your cool. Nothing is gonna break your cool. You're actually settling down into the flow of things, okay? No sparks have flown, there's been no animosity. So step 1, you've accomplished. Step 2, the planning. Well, you've done everything you can and this person is still there, okay? Now, step 3, treat it as a competition. So I'd like to think that if I do my job, if I meet and beat the expectations of my client, if I wrap it, if I sugarcoat this project, and I do 3 times the amount of work that they ever thought they were going to get. I take the best photos in the world. On top of the photos, I do video while the other videographer is at the event, okay? To show them what I can do for them, okay? I treat this as a competition, and my goal is to wow the client, because the next time they call me, they might say, hey, I don't need 2 people at this gig. I'd rather give all my money to Hunter. They're happy, I'm happy, it's all good, we're all happy. This is why you need to always do the best you can do. If you rest on your laurels, you'll get lazy. If you get lazy, you'll fall into a rut. Clients will stop calling you. You have to be on the edge. This is the jungle, okay? This is the real world of survival. You have to be on point at all times. That's the only way you build a reputation, and reputations don't get built for many decades. It might even take your entire life to build a reputation, but staying on point, providing consistency and quality at all times ensures that there is nothing that you can be blamed for. In fact, there might be wonderful things happen to you down the road. Number 4, try to understand why that other person is there. Are they actually better than you? Maybe they have better camera than you do. Maybe the camera is thousands of dollars, whereas my camera only costs $500, okay? Now, maybe they're lazy, okay? But that was already point 3, but we're trying to understand why this other person is here. Another theory I've thrown out is this other person may be, you know, a brother-in-law of the client. They may have done, you know, such an incredible job for the client that the client always puts them first, okay? You, as a new provider to this client, haven't had the time to prove yourself to the client. So maybe this other person has been with them for 10 years, and maybe it's a no-brainer, you know, why that other person is here. So part of keeping your cool allows you to start to understand and put the dots and the pieces together of why this other client is here, why this other service provider is here. Or maybe this other service provider, you know, works for the New York Times or has some incredible connection and something you could never provide, okay, in your current status, okay, and maybe that's why they're here. There's a myriad, infinite different reasons why this person could be here. So just try and understand that, and that will help you react to this situation with as much knowledge as possible. So this gets us to the final point, number 5, which is attempt to break the ice with the other professional. And this is really key. And let me tell you some stories. I've been on this gig and I kept my cool. Okay, of course I didn't want them to be there, but the client was, you know, was not really a business person. The client was, you know, a person who maybe not the most organized person in the world. So it probably didn't even occur to them, hey, I might be stepping on Hunter's toes by inviting somebody else into the space with him. It didn't even occur to the client. But regardless of that, try and break the ice with the other professional. And it can go a few different ways. Worst case scenario, they could, snap at you. Okay, they might be equally, they might be less experienced than you and unable to keep their cool. Okay, so, and that's not even, that's nothing. I have rhinoceros skin. I live in New York City. Forget about it. But this other person might not be as experienced as you. They might be fragile and frazzled. They might have had a bad day. And you try and reach out to this other person and build a relationship, and they might snap at you. And that's not even the worst case scenario. I mean, like, the worst case scenario is like they try and get you kicked out of the venue, or they try and backstab you and say something insidious to the client. But all of it, don't worry about all of this. Don't get your, your panties in a twist. Don't get your, it doesn't really matter what happens. The only thing that matters is that you gave it 100%. So that if the worst possible scenario happens and, the gig turns into a disaster, at least you will be 100% confident that you gave your best. And it's not going to kill you. It goes back to what Nietzsche said, which is what doesn't kill you make you stronger. So as long as you gave 100%, and if the worst case scenario happens, somebody says something bad about you, you can always apologize. And if the relationship between the client is absolutely unrecoverable, then you just move on and you keep providing that consistent quality, that consistent professionalism, going above and beyond in all circumstances. And eventually, if you stick with it for 36 months, for 10 years, for 15 years, it will pay back, okay? You have to evolve, you have to adapt at all times, but I'm completely confident in this approach. Now, I've just laid out some of the worst case scenarios, but what I would call the best case scenario is you reach out to the other professional who's at the gig, and they don't snap at you, but they're not exactly friendly. But I would call this the best case scenario, because at least they're willing to respectfully communicate with you, and they understand, hey, they have compassion. They understand, hey, I don't actually want you here. I don't want Hunter here either. It's either him or me. I would rather it be just me and the client, or just him and the client. But having that communication with the other professional is key, because let's paint another scenario, which is the client calls you back for another gig, and you say, hey, I really prefer to be your only professional at the gig. I felt like my space was being blocked, that they were slightly getting in my way, and I just think that things would be more harmonious if I was the only professional at the gig. And they might come back to you quickly and say, oh, but I've been using this person for 10 years, and I'm actually really rich, so I have enough money to pay for both of you. So with all due respect, I would love to have you, Hunter, and the other client, provider at the gig. So now all of this groundwork that you've laid comes into play. Second gig comes around, and you've been absolutely a scholar and a gentleman with the other professional. Second gig comes around, and you actually start building a relationship. And things become slightly less adversarial and slightly more cooperative. And this, is the best case scenario. It's a harmonious scenario. And the goal as a professional is to create these harmonious scenarios with all of your clients. And then, somewhere down the road, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road, it all begins to build into a career, into a reputation. And all of the groundwork that you put into place, comes to fruition. So thank you for sticking with me for this, passionate, motivational speech that I've been wanting to give on this topic for quite a while. I guess that's it for now. I'm gonna, stick back. I told you I didn't get goofy. This was pretty much tragedy. I didn't get it comedic at all, as the two Greek classic situations, but stick with me, subscribe, give me thumbs up, and I promise you there's going to be some super goofy stuff in the future. And if you actually check back into the past Hunter reports, I get pretty goofy too. So again, thank you so much for sticking with me, and I will see you soon.